The Reluctant Prince, the first to break. Chapter 1. Cold Reception. The throne room of Ardenfall Palace gleamed with royal purple and bronze. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting jeweled shadows across marble floors that had witnessed 1,000 years of royal decrees. On the raised dais at the end of the hall, Prince Alistair sat sideways in his ornate chair, one leg draped carelessly over the armrest. He wasn't supposed to be sitting at all. "Must we do this today?" Alistair asked, inspecting his signet ring with feigned fascination. His thumb rubbed the underside of the ring, a habit carved from years of hiding nerves beneath polished arrogance. His voice carried the practiced disinterest that had become his trademark. "I had planned to go riding." King Theron's jaw tightened beneath his silver-streaked beard. "The ladies have traveled from across the kingdom. They await outside these very doors." "How unfortunate for them." Alistair's lips curled into a smirk. Queen Elira, standing tall and elegant beside her husband, narrowed her eyes. "Sit properly, Alistair, and remember what we discussed." Alistair met his mother's gaze. Where the king's eyes held disappointment, the queen's held only cold calculation. Since childhood, she had trained him to view emotions as weaknesses, affection as a liability. In her mind, a king who loved was a king who could be manipulated. "Choose one, marry her, secure the bloodline," Alistair recited in a mocking tone. "The rest is irrelevant. Yes, mother, I remember your tender wedding advice." The queen's expression didn't change. "Good. Then let's not waste any more time." Alistair swung his leg down and straightened in his chair, adjusting the heavy sapphire pendant that rested against his chest. He wore traditional royal attire, a royal purple military-style jacket with bronze buttons and embroidery that traced the crest of Ardenfall across his shoulders. But he'd left the top buttons undone, a small rebellion against protocol. "Fine," he said. "Bring in the sacrificial lambs." King Theron raised his hand to signal the guards, but hesitated. "Son, I know this isn't what you wanted, but please, give them a chance. Perhaps one of them will surprise you." Alistair's expression hardened. "Nothing surprises me anymore, father, especially not noblewomen bred to smile and nod." Before the king could respond, the queen's voice cut between them. "Open the doors!" The massive oak door swung open, and 3 young women entered, each walking in step with the royal procession music. Behind them trailed their handmaidens, carrying small chests containing gifts for the royal family. Alistair watched them with a predator's disinterest. At 23, he had perfected the art of cruelty masked as royal indifference. These young women, all 19, deliberately chosen for their youth and malleability, were just pieces in the game his parents played. The king seeking a love match, the queen seeking an alliance, neither caring what Alistair himself wanted. The ladies approached the dais and curtsied in unison, a perfectly choreographed movement that spoke of weeks of practice. "Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness," the royal chamberlain announced, "may I present Lady Seraphine of House Holloway, Lady Maribel of House Evergreen, and Lady Rowena of House Valebright." Lady Seraphine beamed, her lemon-yellow ball gown catching the light as she stepped forward first. At 19, her innocence was evident in every movement. Blonde curls framed a face flushed with excitement. "Prince Alistair," she said, her voice melodic and rehearsed, "it is the greatest honor to us." "Is it?" Alistair interrupted, examining his fingernails. "The greatest honor? Not the second greatest? How disappointing for your other life achievements." Seraphine's smile faltered, confusion crossing her features. I only meant—" "I know what you meant," Alistair said coldly. "Speak when spoken to, Lady Seraphine. Court protocol. I'm sure it was covered in your preparation." A flush crept up her neck as she stepped back, eyes downcast. Lady Maribel moved forward next, her soft green gown floating around her like water. At 19, she was the most delicate of the 3, with warm brown eyes that reminded Alistair of a doe. Wide, innocent, easily startled. "Your Highness," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. She extended a small leather-bound book. "I've brought you a book." Alistair didn't bother looking at it. "How original. Let me guess. Poetry?" Maribel's lower lip trembled slightly. "Yes, Your Highness. I thought perhaps you might enjoy—" "I don't?" Alistair waved dismissively. "Poetry is for those who lack the courage to speak plainly." Tears welled in Maribel's eyes as she clutched the book to her chest and retreated. Then, Lady Rowena of House Veilbright stepped forward. Unlike the others, she wore no elaborate hairstyle or excessive jewelry. Though also 19, there was something in her bearing that spoke of maturity beyond her years. Her purple gown was elegant in its simplicity, and her dark eyes met Alistair's briefly before lowering in expected deference. "Prince Alistair," she said, her voice clear and steady. Alistair waited for her to continue, to offer some inane compliment or gift, but Rowena simply held his gaze, saying nothing more. Irritation prickled under his skin. "That's it? Just my name? Not very impressive, Lady Rowena? I thought you preferred when people speak only when necessary, Your Highness." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Alistair leaned forward in his chair. "Bold of you to presume what I prefer." "Not bold," Rowena replied. "Observant." The throne room fell silent. Even Queen Elira raised an eyebrow, her interest momentarily piqued. Alistair stood abruptly, causing all three women to take an instinctive step back, all except Rowena, who remained perfectly still. "I'd like to speak with each of you, privately." Alistair's voice cut through the tension. "Lady Seraphine, you'll come to the Royal Solarium in 1 hour. Lady Maribel, 2 hours. Lady Rowena..." He paused, studying her composed expression. "You'll come at sunset." He descended the marble steps until he stood directly before them. Up close, he could see the fine tremor in Seraphine's hands, the slight redness around Maribel's eyes. But Rowena? Rowena's breathing remained steady, her posture relaxed, as if she were merely waiting for a carriage rather than facing the man known throughout the kingdom for his cruelty. "Until then," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a near whisper as his gaze swept over them, "enjoy the hospitality of Ardenfall Palace. I'm sure you'll find it enlightening." With that, he turned and strode from the throne room, his footsteps echoing against marble. The door swung closed behind him with an ominous boom. In the corridor, away from watchful eyes, Alistair pressed his back against the cold stone wall and closed his eyes. His lungs burned as he drew in a ragged breath. This charade, this game, was exactly what he'd spent years avoiding. A royal spouse meant royal heirs, and royal heirs meant... "Problems, Your Highness?" Alistair's eyes snapped open. Standing before him was Lady Rowena, arms crossed, head tilted slightly. "How did you..." He glanced at the throne room doors, still closed, then back to her. "There's no other exit." "There's always another exit," she said simply, "especially in a palace built on secrets." Alistair straightened, his momentary surprise hardening back into contempt. "Spying is beneath even a desperate noblewoman, Lady Rowena." "I wasn't spying, I was leaving." She lowered her eyes, though her voice remained steady. "Forgive me, Your Highness." "And what exactly was your intent in following the same path I took?" "I simply wished to find the gardens, Your Highness." Rowena's dark eyes remained downcast, but something in her composure, the lack of trembling, the steadiness of her breath, distinguished her from the others. "I meant no disrespect." Alistair took a step closer, towering over her. At 23, he had already developed the commanding presence expected of Ardenfall royalty. The three ladies, all barely 19, were deliberately chosen for their youth and malleability, yet this one showed no fear. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you," he commanded. Rowena raised her gaze slowly, meeting his eyes with a quiet steadiness that felt like a challenge despite her respectful words. "You'll learn quickly, Lady Rowena, that in this palace, nothing is simply as it appears." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, "including me." "Then perhaps I should thank you, Your Highness, for the warning. Secrets are safer when named. You may go." He dismissed her with a wave, irritated by her composure. She curtsied deeply and continued down the corridor, her footsteps silent against the stone floor. As her footsteps faded, a cold smile twisted Alistair's lips. "Bend without breaking," he muttered. How quaint, but even the strongest branches snap under the right pressure. As he watched her retreating figure, one thought crystallized in his mind. Lady Rowena of House Veilbright was different. She didn't break like Lady Maribel, didn't flounder like Lady Seraphine. She bent without breaking. And that, Alistair knew all too well, was far more dangerous to the walls he'd built around himself than any display of defiance.